November 25, 1936. In the heart of Berlin, a new agreement was signed, one that would pull the world even closer to global war. It was called the Anti-Comintern Pact, a treaty between Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. On paper, it was presented as a defensive alliance, a pledge to stand against the spread of international communism. But in reality, it was something far more dangerous, the creation of a new front in the battle for global domination. To understand its meaning, we must go back to the mid-1930s, a world trapped between two ideologies. On one side stood the Communist Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, preaching revolution and workers' unity across borders. On the other stood the rising totalitarian powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, determined to crush communism and expand their empires. The world was once again dividing itself into camps. In Europe, Adolf Hitler had risen to power in 1933. He promised to rebuild Germany, to destroy Bolshevism, and to reclaim the territories lost after World War I. In Asia, Japan had already embarked on its own path of conquest. It had invaded Manchuria in 1931, establishing the puppet state of Manchukuo under Emperor.We. Behind these moves lay a common fear and a common enemy, the Soviet Union. By 1936, tensions with Moscow were growing. The Soviet Union supported communist movements around the world, in China, in Spain, in France. For Hitler and the Japanese military elite, this was not only a political threat, but an ideological one. Both nations saw themselves as bulwarks of order and discipline, standing against the chaos of communism. An alliance, they believed, would strengthen their hand and send a clear message to Stalin. The negotiations were discreet, taking place through military attachés and secret envoys. In Berlin, Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop led the German side. In Tokyo, the key figure was Yosuke Matsuoka, a fervent nationalist and strategist within the Japanese ruling elite. The terms were simple but symbolic. Both nations would exchange intelligence about communist activities. Both would consult on measures to safeguard their mutual interests. And if either was attacked by the Soviet Union, the other would remain neutral but lend support diplomatically. The pact was signed in Berlin on November 25, 1936. Germany was represented by Ribbentrop, Japan by Ambassador Kintomo Mushakoji. Though brief, only a few pages long, it carried enormous weight. It was the first formal step toward what would become the Axis alliance. The Anti-Comintern Pact served several purposes. For Hitler, it legitimized Germany's anti-communist stance on the international stage and hinted at future allies beyond Europe. It also helped isolate the Soviet Union, a psychological and political blow to Stalin. For Japan, it offered diplomatic recognition from a major European power, strengthening its position after the condemnation it faced for the invasion of China and Manchuria. It was a marriage of convenience, bound by ideology but driven by ambition. Publicly, the pact was presented as a defensive measure, an alliance of order against the threat of revolution. Privately, both signatories saw it as preparation for future war. Hitler told his generals that the world would soon face a new conflict between the forces of civilization and the forces of Bolshevism. The Japanese military viewed the agreement as a step toward securing their northern frontier against Soviet Siberia. It was, in essence, the birth of a global anti-Soviet bloc. The Soviet Union reacted cautiously. Stalin ordered increased vigilance along the borders and tightened control at home. At the same time, he began seeking new partners, a diplomatic shift that would later lead to the Soviet-German Non-Aggression Pact of 1939, a shocking reversal of alliances that no one at the time could have predicted. Meanwhile, Germany and Japan grew closer. In 1937, Fascist Italy joined the Anti-Comintern Pact, formally linking Rome, Berlin, and Tokyo. By then, the Second Sino-Japanese War had erupted, and Hitler's armies were rearming at full speed. The ideological axis was solidifying, Europe and Asia united under a shared hatred of communism and democracy alike. The propaganda machines of both nations went into overdrive. Posters, speeches, and radio broadcasts painted the alliance as a heroic stand against chaos. Communism was depicted as a plague, a global conspiracy seeking to destroy nations from within. In Germany, school children were taught that Bolsheviks were the enemy of civilization. In Japan, newspapers praised the emperor's divine mission to save Asia from the Red Menace. But beneath the slogans lay cynicism. Neither Hitler nor the Japanese generals trusted each other fully. Germany's long-term ambitions lay in Europe, not Asia, and Japan's focus was on China, not Russia. Yet for a brief moment, their interests aligned perfectly. The pact gave both sides what they needed: legitimacy, confidence, and a sense of shared purpose. The Anti-Comintern Pact was renewed and expanded several times before and during the war. By 1941, it included more than a dozen nations, from Hungary and Romania to Spain and Finland. Together, they called themselves the defenders of the civilized world, but in truth, they were the architects of its destruction. Looking back, November 25, 1936, stands as one of those quiet turning points in history. There were no invasions that day, no battles, no speeches to the masses, just a handful of signatures in a Berlin office. And yet that document helped set the course for the Second World War. It united Germany and Japan, two powers separated by continents under one purpose: to challenge the existing world order. And in doing so, it brought humanity one step closer to the greatest conflict in history. The Anti-Comintern Pact, signed in silence, driven by fear, and destined to reshape the world.